Well, this is the second in a series of reflections for Holy Week on the theme of gardens. And following on from Eddie's that he delivered in the garden of Southwark House, which is workplace at the moment, it seemed appropriate to give this one also from a garden, from the vicarage garden, and surrounded by the bird song seemed quite appropriate. In Eddie's reflection, he spoke of 3 gardens that have been close to his heart and in which he has walked closely with God. Things won't be quite so autobiographical in this reflection, I'm afraid, but I'm going to double the number of gardens for you. I have 6, although this is essentially a tale of 3 gardens. A garden of judgment, a garden of obedience, and a garden of new creation. But first to that refrain to which Eddie kept returning last night. The kiss of the sun for pardon. The song of the birds for mirth. You are closer to God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on the earth. It's never been a favourite of mine either, being a little too trite for my taste, but in its proper context of a poem about the garden of creation, of Eden, it made much more sense. And it is to the Garden of Eden that we turn as the first of our gardens, the fruit of God's work of creation. My theological college, Westcott House in Cambridge, where I trained for the priesthood, was modelled on a classic Oxbridge college. It was set around a quadrangle with a garden in the middle. And the garden was deliberately laid out with one half formal and the other kept as a wild garden. The contrast could be very marked in summer when there was a definite line down the middle with one half of the lawn well manicured and the other just left to grow and grow. It was well done and a beautiful little spot, and the idea was that the garden was supposed to symbolize the 2 halves of God's creation, of order and chaos. I never really got involved in the gardening there. I don't think any of us did. But I do know that it was a constant struggle to ensure that the wild half didn't encroach on the well-kept side, that chaos did not overwhelm order. My father was a great gardener. I think he was closer to God's heart in his garden than anywhere else on earth. And growing up, we were blessed with a fantastic big garden, an acre plot, and Dad was forever working in it. He would normally have to be called several times for meals and would often have to be reminded that actually it had got dark about an hour ago. And I remember wishing that he would stop and relax a bit. But I realise now that someone had to keep the garden in good order so that it could be a space we all enjoyed. And I can't now tell him how much I regret that I took his garden and his hard work for granted. My point is that creating a garden is hard work. Bringing order out of chaos is hard work. It's no coincidence that Adam is set to live in a garden, a lasting sign of God's work of creation. A lasting sign of God's desire to continue that work of creation, and a lasting sign that life with the Creator is a bulwark against the forces of chaos and disorder. Adam is commanded to be the one to tend the garden, to be God's partner in creation. But like me, when I was growing up, he just took it for granted, took God for granted and went his own way. The garden of creation became the garden of judgment. And humanity was cast to the mercy of what lay outside, disorder and chaos. It can often seem, can't it, that we are always in the grip of the forces of chaos and disorder, perhaps particularly at the moment, as we live constrained and fearful lives because of a microscopic virus. Viruses are in many ways chaos and disorder made real. They can't really be constrained or tamed, can reveal the darker side of creation. Over the last week, I have spent an hour or so most days digging and rotavating in our allotment on the edge of Wedmore. It had rapidly been returning to a meadow, and four of us, myself and Lisa and two close friends from church who have taken over part of the allotment, are trying to dig out the wretched couch grass. It's hard work, and at the end of each hour I don't really seem to have made much difference at all. And I know that no matter how hard I try, the roots will always find a way of stretching their way back in, and off we go again with the fork and the rotavator. But as I've dug, I have also reflected that this is something of a metaphor for the way that my life can be. No matter how hard I try and root them out, the weeds just keep on coming back. A metaphor too for how the world can seem. All those age-old conflicts and rivalries that just won't go away no matter how hard we try and how dormant they seem. All that chaos and disorder just waiting to creep back in. As Christians, we give thanks that we have in Christ a bulwark against those forces of chaos. Someone to follow who can lead us to two other gardens, obedience and new creation. Where Christ is truly present, then there is peace in hearts, in homes and nations, and then there is hope. It is no coincidence that the work of undoing Adam's disobedience was begun in another garden, Gethsemane, where the olive trees still take root at the bottom of the Mount of Olives. There, Jesus wrestles with Satan once more and is tempted again. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. But unlike the first Adam, there is no turning away from a close walk with the Creator, no step towards chaos. Jesus chooses instead the path of obedience. But not my will, but yours. And because of that obedience in a garden, the long walk away from Eden is finally reversed. And so it is that in another garden, a few days later, that work of recreation is fully accomplished. Jesus lives. The tomb cannot hold him, and the second Adam walks once more in a garden with his Father. Jesus' obedience to the Father, even unto death, has given humanity another garden in which God's love can hold us and allow us to challenge and keep at bay the chaos of our own hearts and the chaos of the world. I used to think that it was rather funny that Mary mistook the risen Jesus for a gardener. But now I'm not so sure that she didn't get it right. Jesus is the gardener that Adam never managed to be. And we are indeed nearer God's heart in a garden of resurrection, walking in the company of the risen Jesus than anywhere else on earth. Well, I hope the background noise wasn't too disturbing, in particular the clock from St Mary's continuing to mark out the quarter hours, the half hours, and the hours themselves throughout this time as ever. Something of a ringing out of solidity in this time of chaos, perhaps. But thank you all. I hope that Holy Week brings you many blessings and Easter much joy.